nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mrs. Tully. Mrs. Albright, will you read the mission statement?
Through combined efforts of students, staff, parents, and community members, our mission is to foster the confidence, knowledge, cognition, and character necessary to instill a strong work ethic, to create an environment of tolerance and respect, and to ignite an attitude of inquiry and enthusiasm for learning that will enable students to become productive, responsible citizens.
Thank you. I need a motion to accept the agenda. First, Mrs. Jerry, second, Mr. King. All in favor? So moved. No president's messages. Want to get right to why we're here tonight. No BOSS representative report, no consent agenda, no business reports, no CSE reports. Just want to remind everybody, this is a budget hearing. It's not your typical board meeting. So a lot of the things that you saw on here saying not at this time, it's because it is a budget hearing. However, we will approve the board minutes from March 2nd. Can I get a motion?
Fix my computer.
Motion, Mr. Carmen, second, Mrs. Hovley. All in favor? Okay, we can get right into it. Budget workshop. That's you.
Sure. So, I know you've had a chance now to go over the budget, review it from the meeting we had at the beginning of the month. And although every budget can be challenging as we try to anticipate any issues that may impact our budget for the following year, this year we had, for example, a large number of English as new language students who moved in at the end of the summer, requiring us to hire 2 new teachers. So those kinds of things can happen. But even taking into consideration that, we really don't know what September is going to look like. We don't know if we're going to have to maintain some type of remote learning. We don't know what PPE, distancing, none of those guidelines are out yet. So the budget really is essentially kind of built on that fact that we're kind of figuring that it's business as whatever this is usual. The budget does come with our tax levy limit of 1.22%. That translates into an additional $97,000 roughly. And this budget comes with some changes that will minimize any impact to learning. Some of the areas addressed include moving from 2 school nurses to 1 after one of our nurses retired. It becomes possible, certainly given the number of students we have, but also a capital outlay that will make the nurse's office conducive to elementary students and secondary students, while allowing privacy for all involved. Our ENL students that we got over the summer, those who've been with us and some of our new ones have made great gains. As we look forward, we see a number of our students testing out of that need for additional service, and given that, we will make cuts to that area. Our guidance secretary, who was in the attendance office previously, will person the attendance office in addition to her duties as guidance secretary. On those occasions when guidance is particularly busy, for example, awards time, even the beginning of the year, we will get a substitute in the attendance area, not unlike what we do with teachers in giving them release time. With the retirement in the building maintenance area, we changed the title to one that reflects the duties of the evening staff, so from a maintenance technician to a cleaner. One of the largest areas where we realize savings is by not having to purchase a bus this year. That will have implications in years to come, given we won't have aid to offset any future purchases. But all told, we have realized roughly $464,000 in savings. The cuts to our program, while significant, minimizes any impact for our instructional program, and it allows us to hold at the 1.22% levy limit. In summary, our proposed budget is $15,495,435, which is a 2.93% or 440 roughly thousand increase from the current year's budget. Our state aid is $5,587,015 this year, which is, last meeting I said that in the last 13 years we've only realized a 1% gain in foundation aid. And certainly we all know that year to year all of our expenses go up more than 1%, and unfortunately this has been over 13 years for us to realize a 1% gain. So as with everything, we've discussed and put on the table. I'll certainly answer any questions. Lisa, I'm sure, will back me up and sing this duet with me. But ultimately, I'm very proud of the work this board has done and this district has done to maintain as many programs as we can for our students. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on the budget right now? I just had one question, and it's probably a crazy question because it's so variable you won't know. With this budget, say we should have an increase in gasoline prices, increase in heating and electrical costs. Is that factored in, and is there a way to make up the difference for that?
It is factored in. I look at a trend and what the expenses are, and there was actually, those lines were purposely over budgeted for fund balance purposes. So when I looked at the trend, I go, there's enough even if there's an increase in those lines.
Okay.
So, and plus a lot of it, we are given a lot of heads up on the gas and the electric because we're in a consortium through Onondaga BOCES, through NISMIC. So it's controlled cost. So it's the service and that and stuff like that that I'm anticipating is going to be across an increase in the delivery, especially.
And who are we currently on contract with for our fuel?
You're talking about the natural gas,
No, I'm talking about like for the fuel for
The
the
town.
buses.
the town of New Hartford.
Okay, I thought we had been with them, and did they give you a fixed cost for next year's budget?
No. It's whatever they lock in at, and then they charge us, I think it's a 5 cent per gallon pump fee. So, no, so we just factor in, I look at the thing, I factor in for an increase, and I say, okay, I think, this is where I'm gonna, put into where I'm gonna lie the budget line.
Okay, and I apologize, because I probably should have asked you
No, that's
sooner.
okay.
But I was thinking about it as Dr. Sullivan and I was
I think we all think about it every time we go to the pump ourselves.
Right, well, she was talking about how we budget for our own personal expenses and with things going up, all of a sudden popped into my head because where I used to fill my gas tank for $25, I'm now filling it for $37.
Right,
Well, so,
Well, let me tell you, when your 19-year-old daughter comes home and says, when I first went to college in Cortland, I was paying $1.95. She was paying. And now it's like $3. Like, well, I'm glad she at least noticed. I mean,
yeah.
but when a kid even notices that,
I had the
that
same
dramatic,
conversation myself.
that dramatic increase. So yeah, no, the way that the budget's structured, it should be able to handle any increase in those areas, at least on their major headers like natural gas and stuff like in those lines. It's better controlled because we pay like 6 fixed payments based on usage, and then the delivery can change, and that's where you see the increase. So I think there's enough money in those lines to at least. I'm not saying that I won't have to raise it next year.
Mhm. Thank you. I mean, like I said, I was just curious as to, what we would do in an instance like that. And I know in the past, what you've done is you've taken from another line
Right.
and you've moved it. But I know with funds being so limited in most areas, how many lines can you move from, to rob Peter to pay Paul when it's not there? Anybody else have any questions for Lisa? Mr. King?
I emailed Lisa this question. On line 1330 for tax collector, we have no monies there, but I'm sure we're paying the town of New Hartford and the town of Whitestown some fee for them collecting our taxes.
We do. They receive, and it's they keep the interest on the uncollected. So in other words, when there's an interest payment that goes in on the uncollected numbers, that's the dollar figure that they receive for those services. So it's roughly probably, I would say, $3,500 for New Hartford and less than that for Whitestown, and less than you could ever hire if you were to have a collector do it.
Certainly.
So it's a
But it
good
doesn't show
deal.
up.
I hope they don't revisit it.
But it doesn't show up as an expense on the budget. It's just a reduction of revenue.
It's revenue we never realized. So
Okay.
it would be a revenue that we would realize. So it's kind of, and we've never been challenged as far as an auditor as to say, well, proper accounting, because we just never realized the revenue. If they were withholding it from the actual taxes that we collect, that's a different story. I'd have to expense it from somewhere and show the decrease, but we don't here.
Okay. And then the other question I had, Jackie asked one of my questions. The other question I had was about, since we're no longer using board docs, does that show up under a reduction in board expenses or is it somewhere else?
Well, considering that board docs was in a different section of the budget last year, they moved the COSER. It made it under budget and the line where it would normally be up in the SPOSI's code, so I had to account for other expenses. That line should have been this year around 14,000,
Okay.
the 10,490, and I took it down to 6. You just can't see it because it wasn't in that place originally.
Got it.
Yeah, so that's a good question actually, because you wouldn't, knowing that there's a decrease in that, you can't see it.
It's lovely when they change codes just to throw you off. That's
There's
all I
quite a
really
few
had.
of them, too.
I asked my other questions last month.
For as long as anybody's known me on the board, every year I ask the same question about the textbooks. We never have anything marked in those lines. Do we never, ever need them?
That's your principal's budget for what they need in the textbooks. I can tell you this, where I check in broad strokes.
Mhm.
So when I look at that number, it's well above what you receive in textbook aid.
Mhm.
So I don't question them as to their needs. If
Just
they
to-
were below the textbook aid that you would generate, I would go and say, hey, is there anything else that you need? But they're above it, so I let it go.
Well, it's just, like I said, every year, for as long as anybody's known me, I ask that because it never reflects what we're purchasing or if we're purchasing anything. So it kind of looks like we just don't buy any textbooks.
No, that's not the case. You spend every year at least.
Oh, I'm sure we do,
You
but,
But it's more in the consumables.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's, look at the section, it's budgeted for 51.2. That's a total, your aid is 35,000.
Right,
So they're buying textbooks.
right. It's just that I guess I'm looking for more clarity.
And
Like some of the items here, like where we see dashes, if we're spending the money, I want to know what we're spending and where we're spending it.
that's a question for Miriam and Brent, because they do the actual budgeting in that section, based on the needs of what their teachers tell them to.
I mean, I'm sure we're doing that. Our children are learning. Our numbers reflect that our children are learning. But it's just, when you don't have something in those columns,
I think
it
you're
looks like
seeing
we don't have
I think you're
anything.
seeing such a breakdown in, truthfully, what the state is looking for. The state's looking for one code, 2110-480. This is broken down by math and social studies and in 6th grade and 4th grade and whatever else it might, tech or whatever. That all gets balled into one code of their spending, and that's what I report to the state. So I think it's just because it's so spread out through that budget. But if you look
I
at it,
understand
it
that.
totals, it's in an actual, they budgeted 44,000 last year and they're budgeting 51.
Because if you remember some years ago, when you did revise the budget at the request of everybody, there were no empty spaces. Everything was accounted for. I'm sure you remember those times.
Yeah, that was never revised. That's why it's still the way it is. So,
All right, it was just a question, because like I said, when you're looking at it, you go, well, okay, it's blank.
but it isn't. You need to go down to the bottom where it's saying you're spending, $51,000 on textbooks. So it's just that it's spread out through a lot of codes, and they, 1 year, let's just say, Mary will say, I'm not buying any music textbooks, but the next year you'll see $5,000 on that
Under
line.
music textbooks. Well, yeah, and then this year with nobody here and with the COVID outbreak, I don't see any textbooks unless we have a surplus of them someplace that haven't been touched.
Well, we bought a textbook.
Can I say, isn't a lot more of it though too is how we're teaching our students, and it's not always, like I see a lot in the workbooks and a lot in that stuff, so it might not be textbook driven, but it's driven in other
Especially on the
areas.
elementary side. as Lisa said, 21-10-480, you see that $26,000, that's $26,000 on workbooks. And that's what the kids work on. They really, that's everything in the workbook.
And that is their textbook.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think what I was looking for was an explanation, if there had been an explanation to that. Because then it looks like, okay, well, we don't need any money in that area.
But also software now, some software also falls into textbook aid, where that didn't always used to be true.
Like I said, rest assured, you spend well above your allotment, according to the state anyway.
Right, and if you look in the secondary textbooks, last year, business had a significant, they bought new textbooks. So this year it's less because we're just looking at replacements or workbooks. English, you're always gonna have to have replacements because you're giving kids paperbacks. Math is doing e-math instruction, which is a large workbook consumable that goes along with online program. The increase there in social studies is for an AP course that has changed, so that we needed to get an updated book for that course specifically.
Right, and I appreciate that, Mrs. Facci, because it does show that we're purchasing things for, teaching and learning here. And it reflects on here when we're trying to justify a budget. That's an important area to us, is that children are learning. Any other questions for? Okay, I'm going to straw poll before we put it on the floor. Mr. King, you comfortable with the budget?
Thumbs up.
Mrs. Albright?
Yes.
Mrs. Jerry?
Yes.
Mrs. Hubley?
Yes, thank you for all the hard work.
Mr. Carney?
Yes.
Mrs. Jordan?
Absolutely.
Okay, then we can move on. And we can make a motion to adopt the budget. So I need a motion. Motion, Mr. King, second, Mrs. Jordan. We've had board discussion. All in favor? So moved. Thank you very much for your hard work on that.
Absolutely.
4.3, district reopening. Doctor, that's you again.
Yep, so, last week, the county executive, met, briefly with the superintendent and, rolled out what he felt his, suggestions should be for an ideal classroom and an ideal bus. They weren't necessarily practical suggestions. For example, students would need to wear a face mask and a regular mask in order to be fully protected. So in the cafeteria, his recommendation was that they could take down the regular mask and then eat with just the shield on. So we were kind of waiting to see, so what would the State Department of Health and State Ed come up with, that would give us a little bit more guidance. And actually the CDC came out with recommendations that they've seen in studies. There's no difference from 6 feet in a mask and 3 feet in a mask for students. And so with that, it was a game changer really for our whole region. And so we are looking to bring students back, our secondary students back full time, hopefully by the 4th marking period. Obviously, there are parents who will still opt to have their children remote and will need to adjust for that. But largely, we will certainly invite, if there's elementary parents who want their kids to come here for the in-person, but we've had that opportunity, that offer for them, and they typically haven't taken advantage of that. With more numbers that we can put in classrooms, we can certainly reach out again to students who may not be doing particularly well in the virtual program and encourage them to make a different choice. But obviously, right now it is parental choice. So that's where we are right now. We met with the teachers last night, got some good questions, so we're kind of researching. I've got a survey ready to go out and go live with parents and get a sense of where parents are. So that should go live probably tomorrow. And yes.
Because the CDC nation CDC? Do we have to wait till the New York State decides to adopt these rules?
So when we discussed that with our attorney, and they would prefer that we waited for the governor. But the governor doesn't seem to be acting on any of that. So at this point, we feel like we need to come back to whatever normal is right now. This gives us at least probably 8 weeks. Fourth marking period is always a little shorter, to at least see, so how's this working? What are the things we need to tweak? Since we don't know what September is going to look like, it gives us kind of a chance to see what that will look like. There's issues in the cafeteria. Obviously, students still need to be 6 feet apart in the cafeteria. So we need to figure out where we're feeding everybody if they come back. The hallways, we have to make sure that we're moving kids through the hallways because we can't stagger. We're too small to stagger periods. The good news is the CDC recommendation took phys ed, music, and band, chorus and band, down to 6 feet, just a little bit more realistic. So, we've been pushing, we did push the legislators. I called Assemblywoman Clinton Sean. We've all kind of taken somebody different to rally and actually asked them to advocate to the governor's office to adopt the CDC regulations as quickly as possible. So we're going to continue to monitor, we're going to continue to screen, we're going to continue to do all the things that we've been doing to make sure that our students are as safe as possible, and we will continue to do that.
Mr. King?
We were doing, when we were doing the half and half remote, block scheduling. We're going to keep the block scheduling, or are we going to go back to the regular period?
No, we'll go back to a regular 9-period day.
I kind of like the block scheduling.
I kind of like the block scheduling too, and I
You
think
spend
we
less time
should
doing
think about
administrative stuff and more time educating, right?
Well,
A lot less movement in building.
true, but the issue really is we're so small that we have teachers who right now are teaching, for example, on a Monday, they have the 7th grade maybe on Monday at first period, their first block, and on Thursday they have chemistry. So it's there. We have too many teachers who are teaching 7-12.
how many.
Just about everybody, really.
In the core areas.
And I'm a big advocate for block scheduling, only because by the time children transition and you get them settled in, you lose a lot of valuable instructional time. I know years ago we proposed block scheduling and we had a board that tried to make it work. And again, it was the same thing. But I think we shortchange our students when we don't give them that opportunity. Some kids, it takes 10 or 15 minutes just to settle into the chair and to get the teacher to get them settled in. So I just think it's a valuable tool, and I would wish that we would explore it some more.
And I do think we now have teachers who are more open to exploring it. I think the issue though is if we really want to do this certainly before the end of the school year, we need to essentially go back to the schedule that was originally built.
Mrs. Jordan?
I think the other concern that comes up with being able, or if we did continue the block scheduling, would be because we have to disinfect in between. So now we're taking more time out of the classroom time to disinfect before the next class comes in. And then my other part was, right now the kids are really hauling all of their stuff in their backpacks through the whole day because they can't go back to their locker other than for their coat. 8 periods of stuff is going to physically be a tremendous physical problem. So I hope they can at least use their lockers.
Right, so I'm gonna recommend when students arrive to go to their locker for their first 4 classes, go right before lunch again to make a switch, and then the end of the day.
Okay.
And otherwise, teachers need to be fronting their doors to keep them moving.
Okay. Because I know that 4 periods a block is a heavy backpack with your computer. 8 periods is physically impossible or detrimental. Yeah.
I'm just going to make one last comment, which is this is day-to-day operations, which is obviously in your purview. And what I would like you to do, in my opinion, is just see if it can be explored for the fall. It's something that I think I heard somebody say limit the exposure in the hallways because they're out there less. And the administrative time in the beginning of the class, taking attendance and doing that work. If you did that, and what is it, 6-day weeks down in elementary, we could do 2-day, every other day, switch back and forth or something to that effect.
And there's
Just-
certainly a variety of block models out there. Some are, some modified, some are maybe not 80 minutes, but maybe 60 minutes. So there's certainly things that we can work with the teachers and look at.
Yeah, and I think I will disagree with Mr. King. I don't see it so much as a day-to-day operation. I see it as a board of directors, a board of education, looking at efficient and effective ways to oversee the business that we do. So I think in that aspect, yes, the nuts and bolts logistics are for our administrators to iron out. But certainly we, 7 of us, are the advocates for the students of the district and what is in the best interest of those students. So in that aspect, I think it's a reasonable request to ask the administrators to explore that.
And why not poll the students to see how they're feeling about the block scheduling versus that? I mean, they've all, probably except the 7th graders, have experienced the what they're gonna go to now versus the block scheduling. And it may be, you're gonna get just about halfway down the line, I like going to each class, or I like, the longer period of time, but. And the teachers, I think it'd be interesting to see now that the teachers have had the opportunity to meet with them.
At our meeting yesterday, science teachers are more than happy to go to the block.
Oh, I'm sure, they can actually see a lab.
English teachers were not quite as enamored of it. So, and it's true, it depends on how your modality of teaching, how you teach. It depends on your content. There's a lot of variety. It depends on the age group as well.
Certifications are gonna have a lot to do with it also.
Yeah.
Some of them are pretty limiting.
That's true. So what?
Certifications of specific sciences.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
I'm confused because I thought most of our teachers were certified for the jobs we hired for.
They are, but we can't, if they can only teach, for example, living environment, they can't necessarily, if we needed somebody else in a different science, they can't cross.
Yeah. No, it's not true with math though.
No, not true with math, not true with English or social studies, actually.
So science is science is always kind of a rough one.
Science and foreign language and the special areas.
Okay, and at the last meeting, when you talked about the children coming back, you said that should some of the elementary students choose to stay home and do remote, they would continue with BOCES. Does that still hold true?
Yep, it still holds true.
What about secondary who don't want to come back?
So secondary, we really are gonna have to look at a different model. It won't be synchronous. That really would be actually too much for us to kind of figure out. So we're trying to explore and look at some different options, check out, what some other districts are doing for ideas. One of the things that one of our teachers suggested yesterday was doing almost like we do with homebound instruction, which is, somebody will then log on with students at the end of the school day.
Well, that would be another factor to figure into a budget.
It would. The other option is that the work is all asynchronous.
So asynchronous, they're not going to get this full effect, but the material is there. Is there an option to allow the parents to homeschool?
Absolutely, that is always an option.
Okay, because I see all kinds of things that could go wrong if you do synchronous learning, including, FERPA violations, students in there.
Not to mention, if a teacher moves around, which is what we want teachers to do,
Exactly.
it's hard to stay on camera without showing everybody else in the classroom.
So that's another question, and it goes back to the budget, which we already approved. Do you have money in there to move for the additional cost that, we would incur as a district if people chose not to send their children back?
Yeah, right now we do.
8 weeks.
Right.
And we don't know what the mandate will be for September. There's been talk about it being, a medical reason why somebody would be remaining in a remote situation, but we really don't have any firm guidance right now.
Mhm. Well, we'll all stay tuned for that.
I was just gonna say, at SBI the other night, they were talking about what's down the pike, whether or not the state was going to allow remote learning as an option for parents after the end of the school year. And of course, it's all a crapshoot, no one knows. They were also they were talking about remote for summer school, whether that was going to exist. And I thought actually that might be a better thing for some of the students, but I don't think that's gonna happen either.
So my personal opinion, if they were gonna be successful in a virtual learning environment, they wouldn't need summer school. They would have already been successful.
I have a situation with a child that I'm close to who had trouble with a particular teacher, went to summer school and got it like that.
And that's true, and that's true if they're in person or remote.
So I don't know necessarily if it's the student or the relationship between the student and the teacher that
It plays a
always
lot.
affects the outcome.
That certainly weighs in.
They have to be careful too that students don't, and I've heard this from a previous administrator, well, they kind of just have a good time during the school year and hang out with their friends and do nothing because they know for those 6 weeks in the summer, they can still get the same credit that all their buddies got credit for during the course of the school year. So we have to be careful. And it's kind of a nice trade-off. If I don't have to do anything the whole school year, but I can go take summer school and in 6 weeks, boom, I got it.
Transportation is the issue.
Yeah, I don't think that's, I think that there probably are students who feel that way. I don't think that's the majority.
No, that's what I'm saying. Be careful. There are some that legitimately need the extra time to process the information, but there are some, it goes back to knowing your students. And in a district our size, I would assume we would be able to know who our students are that may do that.
I have one statement and one question. So I definitely agree with everybody on the block scheduling. I think just hearing it from a few students, they absolutely appreciated just having that extra time in the class. And then my question is, you were talking about the shield and the mask. So are you thinking if they come back full-time in the fourth quarter, it'll be both? Or
No, it will just be the mask.
Okay.
That was the CDC study that they did. It was a study that was done in actually Massachusetts. And they looked at the data from 6 weeks, or 6 feet with masks and 3 feet with masks. There was no discernible difference. We're also looking at states now that have had essentially no mask policies and trying to, they're gathering data from there. So we're not really seeing still schools being, the super spreaders that we were afraid of.
Right.
Not that it isn't because we've planned, we've done, everything we're supposed to do. I'm not saying that it's a magic bullet, but I think people have worked really hard to make sure that our students are safe, our staff is safe, and we're going to continue with those same things.
Any other questions? Which is kind of funny because we're not going to act on this resolution until you talk to us about 5.2, which is, we're here, Board of Education meeting, calendar change. We don't need any action on that? It's a workshop?
There was a date in the beginning that we were voting on the BOCES, and they couldn't give it to us exactly, so we put it on where they thought it was going to be, and that's the 27th instead of the 28th.
Okay,
So it wasn't our change, it was theirs.
all right. So
My question is,
5.2.
do we need the May 4th meeting then? Can we roll the May 4th into the April 27th meeting a week earlier?
It's the budget hearing is May 4th.
Okay. Never mind.
All right.
Nice try.
I'm going to hope that we can do the budget hearing actually in person too. That's my goal.
And the one on the 27th, I bet it won't last 10 minutes, we just have to vote. And two things, people coming in and the budget, that's it, done.
Any thoughts when we're gonna be able to do an open meeting?
We're thinking soon, if things are starting to open back up, we're just waiting for the executive orders to kind of catch up. But I also don't want to push for more executive orders, so.
Yeah.
So, true story.
Okay, 5.3, the resolution authorizing the return to full in-person instruction. I need a motion. Motion, Mrs. Hubley, second, Mr. Kerman. Any discussion? All in favor? No principals report at this time unless either of them have something for us. No,
If you
nothing?
haven't yet reserved your streaming ticket for High School Musical, go on the website and do so. It's this weekend.
Thank you, Mrs. Facci. And nothing from the superintendent? Okay, from the floor, there's no, do we have any correspondence?
We do not have anything.
I don't see board discussion on here, but anybody have any burning desire or anything that they'd like to bring up? Okay.
I think we're good.
We were gonna do an executive session until we realized that this was a budget hearing instead of a regular meeting, so no executive session. And I need a motion for adjournment. Motion, Mr. King, second, Mrs. Albright, all in favor? So moved. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
That's quite the record, Jackie, they're pretty close.
And we got a lot done. Got a budget approved.